Good morning, Parkrose. It's Pastor Regina. Today is Sunday, November 8th, and I am delivering your announcements. First, I want to remind us to continue to be in prayer for each other. Let's continue to lift up our church family. There's a lot of different transitions going on. People are dealing with a lot of different things, from illnesses to new moves to new careers to job changes to a lot of things that are left unsaid as well. So, as we journey throughout the rest of this year, let's continue to hold each other close in prayer. I also want to remind us of Charge Conference. Charge Conference is coming up on November 29th, and it is going to be via Zoom. We will be sharing a link and details with you in the coming days about Charge Conference. Stay tuned and look out for that. Today's sermon is going to be coming from Pastor Lamont Williams. I want to ask us to open up our minds and our hearts to be able to receive the word that is going forth today. Pastor Lamont is a worship coach, and he is going to be working with Lesley and Molly. He has been sending in some of his worship videos, and we really want to hear what he has to say today. So please open up your minds and your hearts to receive the word from Pastor Lamont Williams. It's so good to be back in this place and be able to address you all today. I want to thank you all for your continued prayers, and I hope to see you all in some form of fashion really, really soon. We love you. We miss you. We're praying for you. And I hope you have a wonderful, blessed day. Take care.
There is a candle in every soul, some burning brightly, some dark and cold. There is a Spirit who brings a fire, ignites a candle, and makes his home. Carry your candle, run to the darkness, seek out the hopeless, confused and torn. Hold out your candle for all to see it. Take your candle and go light your world. Take your candle and go light your world. Frustrated brother, see how he's tried to light his own candle some other way. See now your sister, she's been robbed and lied to, still holds a candle without a flame. Carry your candle, run to the darkness, seek out the lonely, the tired and worn. Hold your candle for all to see it. Take your candle and go light your world. Take your candle, go light your world. We are a family where hearts are blazing, so let's raise our candles and light up the sky, praying to our Father in the name of Jesus, makes us a beacon in darkest time. Carry your candle, run to the darkness, seek out the hopeless, deceived and poor. Hold out your candle for all to see it. Take your candle and go light your world. Take your candle and go light your world. Go light your world.
There's a peace I've come to know, though my heart and flesh may fall. There's an anchor in my soul. I can say it is well. Jesus overcome, and the grave is over well. Victory is won. He is risen from the dead, and I will rise when he calls my name. No more sorrow, no more pain. I will rise on eagle's wings before my God, fall on my knees and rise. I will rise. There's a day that's drawing near when and the shadows disappear, and my faith shall be my eyes. Jesus is overcome, and the victory has won. He's risen from the dead. He is risen from the dead, and I will rise. More sorrow, no more pain, and I will rise on eagle's wings before my God. Fall on my knees, I will rise. I will rise. And I hear the voice of Mary, angels sing, worthy is the Lamb. And I hear the cry of every longing heart, worthy is the Lamb. And I hear the voice of Mary, angels sing, worthy is the Lamb. And I hear the cry of every longing heart, worthy is the Lamb, worthy is the Lamb. And I will rise when he calls my name. No more sorrow, no more pain. I will rise on eagle's wings before my God. Fall on my knees, and I rise. I will rise. I will rise.
God bless you and good morning. I am Pastor Lamont Williams, and it is great to serve with you as a speaker this morning at your Sunday morning service as a worship coach. And I know worship coaching seems a little different when sometimes we are satisfied with what we have had. But I think there comes a time and a season where we have to look at things and see where we can go to the next level. And that is my goal and my prayer, is to assist what is there and how we can all go to the next level in our music ministry specifically. And I know it may be a little different, but I pray that there are some open minds and open spirits and open hearts. And whenever I am able to come before you in song for worship, that you are blessed, healed, delivered, and set free. And I pray that you have the ability and the opportunity to share as often as you possible when the word comes forth. Today I will be sharing with you, and hopefully in the weeks to come, from a series entitled A Worshipper's Journey. In other words, I like to call it the life of a living worshiper. And if you just give me a few moments of your time, I only hope that what I say will encourage you and bless you on this morning. So let's get started. So here's the reality. We long for God because we want to be in His presence. This sermon explains that while we always live in God's omnipotence, in his omnipresence, when we worship, we experience his glorious presence. It is the presence of God that we long for in our worship services. George Bronner surveyed thousands of church-going Christians. The question was asked, have you ever experienced God in a worship service? Only 1/3 said that they have regularly experienced God in church. William Hendricks' book, he wrote a book and it's entitled Exit Interview. It's about why today's generation is leaving the church. He summarized the views of many worship dropouts, as he calls them. Perhaps the most common complaint was that the worship service was boring. It was not just that those gathering were not interesting, they were not worshipful. Their response was they did little to help people meet God. Another book writer wrote a book entitled Worship Evangelism, says, when worship services that are not worshipful, people not meeting God, people not being allowed to participate in a worship relationship with God, it is as if the very essence of worship has been quietly removed. The most significant benefit of a worship service is connecting with God. It does not matter how chatty the interesting celebrity interview is, or how captivating the drama is, or how stunning the soloist is, or how relevant the message. When personal interaction with God is absent, church loses much of its appeal. When was the last time you experienced the presence of God in a worship service? True life-changing encounter with the living God is missing from many of our churches. Let me say that again. True life-changing encounters with the living God is missing from many of our churches. One of the greatest need among churches today is not new programs, a new sermon, or a new study. What is needed today is an encounter with God. We desperately need a life-changing glimpse of the greatness, the awesomeness, the wonder, the power, the mercy, the goodness, and the living kindness of our God. That is what we are in need of. So let's answer these questions. What is worship? What does worship mean? As in general, what does it mean? Well, when you mention the word worship, it pulls our minds and our imagination for many people in many places. Simply stated, worship declaring the worth of God. Let me say that again. Worship is declaring the worth of God. The word worship comes from the Old English word that means worth-ship. With that definition in mind, we don't worship God for what we get out of it, but we give God the honor that is due him, recognizing his worth, his value, his place in our church, and his claim on our lives. Worship, therefore, is not a weekly pep talk or to rally the troops and win the contest. Worship is not a motivational sermon to make us feel good about ourselves. Worship is not the Christian alternative to a Saturday night rock concert or a Beethoven symposium or symphony. Worship occurs when people encounter God who loves them and adores a relationship with them. Also, another book writer, Robert Woodard, in his book Worship Old and New, says it succinctly that worship is a meeting between God and his people. Worship is a meeting between God and his people. Worship does not lead to an encounter with God. It is an encounter with God. It doesn't lead to one. It is one. When we worship God, rather on our own or in church, we come with an agenda to meet with God. And as important as that is, we need to remember that God has an agenda as well, to meet with us. If worship is about encountering the presence of God, a simple question is raised then. Isn't God's presence always with us? If that's what worship is, encountering the presence of God, isn't his presence always with us? Let's go a little step further. The realities to God's presence. The realities to God's presence. A reality of God's omnipresence. Of course, God is always with us. If I go up to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, you are there. Psalms 139 and 8. This is the reality of God's omnipresence. God's universal presence is a marvelous fact of life. Marvelous fact of life. We cannot escape the presence of God. Sometimes we are blind to it, but never for a minute think that God's presence is not with us. God promised Moses, my presence will go with you. Exodus 33 and 14. My presence will go with you. God promises to manifest his presence as a special way when we worship. For whether two or three are gathered together in his name, I am there among them. I will be there with you. Matthew 18 and 20. God promises to manifest his presence in a special way when we worship. For when two or three are gathered in his name and on one accord, the Bible says in Matthew 18 and 20, I will be there with you. Seems to contradict Matthew 28 and 20. And remember, I am with you always until the end of age. Matthew 28, 20. Why would Jesus promise to be present when two or three are gathered in his name if he has promised to always be there with us? This is under many circumstances. The only logical explanation is that Jesus is speaking about a different kind of presence. In the first passage, something more than just God's omnipresence. The reality of God's revealed presence. Lamar Bushman, I believe I'm saying his name right, calls this type of presence the revealed presence of God. An unusual revelation of God's essence in a certain location. An Old Testament scholar, Terence Forthman, calls it God's tabernacling presence. Some refer it to as God's manifest presence, God's manifested presence. In corporate worship, God desires to remove our blindfold and give us an extraordinary, breathtaking glimpse of the divine radiance of God. Let's look at the book of Luke chapter 5, verse 17 through 26. It records, and example of both God's omnipresence and God's revealed presence. Jesus was there, omnipresence, in the midst of this crowd that had come to hear him teach. But notice in verse 17, and the Lord's power to heal was in him. Luke chapter 5, verse 17, the NIV translation, translated as, and the power of the Lord was present. And the power of the Lord was present for him to heal the sick. Luke recognized something different. Yes, Jesus was present physically. He was with them, but Luke noticed something more, something different. He noticed the power of Jesus. He noticed the power. Jesus manifested presence that was in attendance too. God's revealed presence was there too. And it was God's revealed presence that healed the man that was brought to Jesus on that day. And it was his revealed presence that caused everyone to be astounded. And they were giving glory to their God. And they were filled with awe and said, we have seen incredible things today. Luke chapter 5, verse 26. We've seen incredible things today. This is the presence we long for in worship. This extra glimpse of God we crave and we want. We need to feel it, to sense it, to experience it, to taste it, and to touch it. And when we do, like the paralyzed man or the person that was sick in the Bible, we will forever be changed. We should ask for his presence. Let's go a little step further. What is needed in worship? It's the question. What is needed? If we could ask God for anything, what would it be? What we ask for says a lot about ourselves. Some people have the opportunity. Moses was one who had the opportunity. Moses met with God and had the opportunity to ask him for anything in the universe. Moses did not ask for food or drink or gold or silver or prestige or riches. Moses had a desire for something far deeper, something higher, something beyond himself, something eternal, something spiritual. Moses had two questions. A hunger for God first. Moses asks in Exodus 33 and verse 13, teach me your ways. The Amplified Bible translation translates it this way. Now, therefore, I pray you, if I find favor in your sight, show me now your way, that I may know you, progressively become more deeply and intensely acquainted with you, perceiving and recognizing and understanding more strongly and clearly, and that I may find favor in your sight. That's the Amplified version of Exodus 33 and 3. Moses wasn't interested in God's ways just because he desired information. His desire came from a heart of a worshiper that was saying, I want to sign up for you for life. Not just to chapter of it or the little piece of it. I want to walk into eternity with you. It was his way to say, I want to become more progressively, more intimately, more acquired with you, with the living God. He was saying that he wanted to experience God every day of his life. He didn't just say, I want this thing just for others. He was talking about a relationship. Moses hungered for God. Moses longed for God. Moses realized that nothing else in the world could compare to his experience of being with God. Moses had a passion for his presence. Let me stop for a moment. Do you realize that you can experience God's grace without experiencing God's presence? Do you realize that you can experience God's grace without experiencing God's presence? You can have an understanding that Jesus died for your sins and not ever even an intimate relationship with him. You can know facts and figures, dates and times and all of those things and still not really know the one who loved you first. What a shame to be saved and not really enter into the joy of knowing Christ. Sadly, people do it all the time. Our churches are filled with people who know who God is but don't really know him and have never experienced his presence. Our worship should hunger for God, an encounter with God. Second, Moses asked, please let me see your glory. Again, Exodus 33, chapter 33, verse 18. The Hebrew word for glory is chabad, which means God's honor, renown, greatness, majesty, weight, and his visible splendor. The word glory used in this setting is closely related to presence and face. Moses wanted to behold God face to face. He wanted to see him. He wanted to see who his father was. He wanted to see God. He wanted a visible encounter with the living God. He was not content with business as usual. He wanted God to show up in his life. Let's pause again. When you come to church, are you tired of business as usual? This is your question. Going through the motions, showing up Sunday after Sunday after Sunday for worship service and not having your soul pierced and touched and stirred, leaving the same way you came in? Don't you want God to show up in your life? We not only need to hunger for God, we need an encounter with God. This encounter, this sense of God's supernatural presence transforms worship from a duty to devotion, from a ritual to a relationship, from just another meeting to a holy gathering. God's attendance in our lives and our experience of him is the essence of a real relationship. I'm almost done. What do we need to do? Well, I'm glad that you asked that question. I kind of have 5 simple but life-changing actions we need to take to experience God's revealed presence in worship. Anticipate God's revealed presence in worship. Expect him. Long for him. Look for God's hand at work in worship. Listen for God's voice. When was the last time we just got into prayer and wanted to listen, not just speak to him, but hear him speak to us? Listen to God's voice. Open yourself up to new manifestations of God's presence. Be sensitive to the relationship of God's Spirit. My conclusion is this. Let me close with two observations regarding experiencing God's presence in worship. Worship leader and composer Marty Nystrom, I believe, observes this. I do a lot of traveling and witnessing on airplanes, and I've heard over and over again, well, I've been to church before, and yeah, it was good, but it's not really my thing. Not really my thing. They probably want to a dead church or something. They probably went to a dead church or something. Who knows? And I've had people say, well, I've read the Bible and it's a good book, but I study the Quran too, and therefore some wisdom there. But I've never had anybody look me in the eye and say, you know what? I've experienced the presence of God, and quite honestly, I don't want it. No one has ever said that to me. Because people who experience the real, hear me, people who experience the real presence of God are changed from the ordinary. They want more of Him. They want more. People who focus and don't try. Now listen, I believe that wisdom, and again, this is Marty, who also wrote the song, as the deer panteth for the water, so my soul longeth after thee. It's the guy who wrote that song. And again, his testimony was, he was speaking, he's traveled, and I'm just reiterating this, he's traveled many days, many times, and with the question that he posed, the response was, one, church is cool, but it's not my thing. I read the Bible, but I read something else too. But just imagine if they would have really focused on Jesus Christ and who He is, and really a manifested relationship, a clear goal to be in His presence. A real goal to be in His presence. And here's the thing. Here's the thing that gets us. When we look for the clear presence, the revealed presence, the manifested presence, the omniscient presence, the massive presence of God, the omnipresence of God. When we look for a deeper moment with God, and not just the formalities of church, but when we look for the realness of Christ, it brings upon us a spirit of being humble, a spirit of submission, a spirit of forgiveness, a spirit of love, a spirit of passion. All of these things that we probably felt when we first came into this relationship with Christ. It comes back. And if you experience Him enough, fully, often, those things will keep recurring. You'll have no choice but to love your enemy. We'll have no choice but to love those that despitefully use us. We'll have no choice but to forgive. Now, granted, forgiveness, does that mean you have to walk with those people? It means it's really for you, but to give them a free get out of jail card as well. That's what happens in the presence of God. The presence of God will say, what can I fix? What can I change? How can I be a part of the movement for the next generation? Listen, I'm done. But I only hope that what you heard today has made you think, has pricked your heart, has made you ask yourself the question, when was the last time you really experienced the presence of God, the wholeness of God, His greatness, His omnipresence? I only hope, as it did when I started studying this moment, this message in this series of when was the last time? And if you haven't, when will you? And I know we're in a pandemic, and the usual place that we experience God is in our tabernacles, is our sanctuaries, and that temple of God. But here's the thing. In this pandemic, it is time to consecrate your home as the sanctuary, as the church. Find you a place to hear God, to read your word, to study, to worship and praise Him. Find a place where you can be like Moses and say, hey, listen, I want a little bit more. I need you. Now, the back end of that, Moses wanted to see him. And the response was to Moses, listen, I can't even show you me. You'll die. You won't even be able to stand it. And when Moses was able to get a glimpse of the backside, his hair turned white. I don't want my hair to turn white, I'm going to be honest. So, but I do want his presence. So I only pray that you were blessed. I'll leave you with this. It takes all of us working together in brotherly love to improve the quality of life for all. I am Pastor Lamont. I serve at Thy Kingdom Come International Church as the executive pastor, and I serve with you all as your worship coach. And I pray with you that you all were blessed. Until we meet again, grace and peace.
You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in my lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord. Yeah. Great are you, Lord. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. Oh, great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise.